we can start now, if you allow me, please.
Please do.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum everyone and good morning. I'm Zainab Naeem and on behalf of SDPI, I greet you all a very warm welcome. Before we begin today's webinar, which is adopting 5G to positively impact the environment, I would like to lay down some housekeeping rules. I would like to request our speakers to keep their microphones off when they're not speaking to ensure good quality for everyone. Speakers are also encouraged to switch on their cameras, especially when they are speaking, if the network allows to do that without any disruption. This webinar will be recorded and the video will be posted online, and it is being live streamed on all our socials right now. You're welcome to revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it with your network. We also invite questions from the people who have joined us online and the colleagues who have joined us on Zoom as well, apart from the panelists at the end or as the session goes. Please feel free to write them in the chat box or on the Q&A box on the right side. Please have the chat box open in the window as well, or you can also indicate that you want to speak by clicking the raise hand tab on the right side of the chat window. So with this, I'll formally set the scene for today's webinar. 5G or the fifth generation standard for mobile networks has higher bandwidth, lower latency, and higher speed. It can connect multiple devices and thus reduce energy consumption. Now, according to various studies, 5G can provide fast and high fidelity communication between processes and machinery, thus reducing emissions. In 2018, the application of mobile technology allowed the manufacturing sector to avoid 11% of emissions, a number that is likely to improve as widespread adoption and fine-tuning the existing mobile communication technology will further cut down the inefficiency. Adoption of 5G in other sectors like transportation, which accounts for a significant part of greenhouse gas emissions, and agriculture can also significantly positively impact environmental efficiency. Adopting 5G will result in fast and comprehensive communication between processes and machinery that will go a long way in reducing the emissions. Deployment of emerging telecommunication technologies and their continuity should therefore be a priority while devising environmental policy. Both the telecom and environment policies should be developed side by side. The government should allocate frequency spectrum to the mobile service providers at affordable rates. Now, according to different researchers, especially the meticulous research, the US is already using 5G technology. However, the Asia Pacific is expected to grow at the highest compound annual growth rate during the forecast period. Major market players in China, Japan, and South Korea are focusing on deploying 5G network infrastructure for media, entertainment, transportation, logistics, healthcare, and manufacturing, among other industry verticals. In short, we can create smart, safer, and more sustainable future by adopting 5G technology. Now, to discuss how the mobile and internet service providers can contribute to 5G by upgrading their systems and how the other sectors to exploit its benefits, we have organized today's discussion with some of the field experts and our experts on ICT and also environment. With this, I would now introduce our panelists. We have been joined by the respected Brigadier Muhammad Yasin, retired Senior Advisor Emeritus, SDPI. We have also been joined by Mr. Khalid Khan, Chairman of Central Asian Cellular Forum, Mr. Aslam Hayat, ICT Regulatory Expert, Dr. Fariha Armagan, Research Fellow and Head of the Center for the Evidence Section Research, SDPI, Mr. Fawad Server, Solutions Architect at Ericsson, Australia, Mr. Omar Malik, Member Telecom, Ministry of Information Technology and Telecommunication, Ms. Mariam Shabir Abbasi, Research Coordinator, University of Vermont, and Advisory Member to the Environmental Justice Council at Vermont, USA, Mr. Abdul Rahman Usmani, Vice President Networks at Jazz Pakistan, and Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Thank you so much to the esteemed panelists for joining us for this important discussion. With this, I would like to request Brigadier Muhammad Yasin retired for his welcome remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Zainab. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Worthy speakers, respected ladies and gentlemen of the audience. On behalf of Sustainable Development Policy Institute, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on adopting 5G to positively impact the environment, a roadmap for Pakistan. In fact, Ms. Zainab has very nicely explained what 5G can do and what 5G cannot do. Therefore, I will skip what I wanted to say because it has already been covered. I would like to specially accord welcome to Ms. Mariam Shabir, an ex-colleague who is joining us from the USA, I think after midnight. And so also to Mr. Fawad Sarwar, who joins us from Australia. I think it is the afternoon over there. Many countries worldwide are exploiting the benefits of 5G because, as Zainab has said, it's broader bandwidth, lower latency, and higher speed. Unfortunately, Pakistan appears to be far away from joining this race. The reason being highlighted by several IT and telecom professionals from various platforms are political and economic instability, higher taxation on IT services, lack of fiber optics infrastructure, expensive frequency spectrum, dearth of dollars, and non-availability of economical smartphones. Even foreign investors are reported to be leaving Pakistan. Even the current services provided by telecom companies are being deteriorated. The available spares for operations and maintenance have been depleted, and government is not allowing to import any telecom equipment. Telecom companies are urging the government to be kind to them. The vital question before us is that in the current unfriendly economic scenario, how Pakistan can deploy commercial 5G networks to enter the race. I am sure with competent professionals on this panel, we can contribute by offering our recommendations on this vital subject to the government and other relevant stakeholders. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, and for rightly posing the very important question regarding how, in the current economic situation, Pakistan can deploy the 5G in the country. So with this, I would like to start the panel discussion. I'll start it with Mr. Khalid Khan. Sir, how, in your opinion, can 5G affect the physical environment? I would request if you can highlight the advantages and the disadvantages overall. Over to you, sir.
Ji, thank you very much. Let me share my screen, some talking points, and maybe we can go extempo on that. So do let me know once you can see the screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ji. Brigadier Saab, Shukriya bahut bahut. And also, Assalamu alaikum to all who have joined now. It's a sheer pleasure. It was difficult to, gather thoughts in Ramadan early in the morning, but even more challenging listening to us. So I'm really grateful that you have given me an opportunity. I have been with the mobile industry since day one when Paktel was being made. So I have that background from 1G to 2G, 3G, 4G, and now we are talking 5G. So I'm a technologist by profession. So I always say that in a technology world, the biggest crime is basically a status quo. So if you there cannot be any stagnation of technology because it has a lot of impact on the industry itself. But in today's world, this impact is much more on the other sectors. And if you see, the last rollover that we had of 3G and 4G, we had a complete transformation of the not only the telecom industry, but also the industries that are related to transport. We saw Uber Careem getting, and people having an option to have different services. Then fintechs had a success story in Pakistan. And Aslam Hayat, our colleague, is here. He could talk about when they started Easy Paisa, which transformed really, for the last 70 years in our history, There was 70 years, the banking sector could not get as many accounts as the mobile sector could only generate in 5 years. So that's the kind of impact technology has. So we are not really looking at, that it should provide faster speed, improve connectivity, improve efficiency and user experience. But we have to look at the broader picture that technology does bring. So with that, my talk is basically rounding about why is 5G so important for Pakistan, as Dr. Saab, Brigadier Saab mentioned, that we have our economic crisis in the country. There are issues with our fiscal policies. There are the industry is in a dire states. But there are more important things that we need to think on, and I will probably 3 sectors that I generally cover now for the last 20 years. I will throw some light on that. And then, of course, we have those challenges. We need to speak about those challenges. We should not shy away from them, because if we do not speak about these challenges, we'll never be able to solve them. And how we can move forward, on these challenges, that's the most important thing that I think we should, speak about. So this is a generality of, how technology has evolved over the years. And I would not go into details of this, because we have our, panelists from the mobile industry. They could dwell more on what are the speeds that are available, how they are different from the other. But from generation to generation, every generation of technology brings its own advantages. And I'll speak more about the general economic well-being that brings upon. So there are 3 important aspects besides what we have already discussed, that 5G can give you more bandwidth, it improves the connectivity, improves user experience and all this. But I think for us as a country, we have to see the first thing that we have to see is how we can improve using technology economic growth, actually, and why 5G is important for the GDP growth. So if you see the growth of the economy, this will only be coming now from adoption of more and more technology, because we had a governance breakdown almost on a lot of things, and it provides an opportunity for not only the government but the private sector also to use technology to leapfrog into providing more innovative services, better services, and we can improve agriculture output. We can do those kind of things. We also talk about the 4th industrial revolution. So if we are not trying to put those pillars in there, so we are going to miss out on that 4th industrial revolution that we also talk about, actually. And this is not about only that, if you bring in 5G, that we will be able to move the economy forward. But alongside with that, we need to also push for other, areas which are related, and which is the fiberization of the industry, because we have very less fiber going on. And if we have to have 5G, then how will that whole data at the edge come back into the network? And then we also need to think about the new Wi-Fi 6E and 7. So they're all interrelated. So we have to look at totality. With my historical experience, we had a delayed 3G, 4G, in Pakistan. And in fact, it got delayed by almost 8 to 9 years. And unfortunately, and then at one point in time, we were trying to push that because we thought, the world has moved ahead and we were lagging behind. And we also did some study actually by Plum Consulting. And one of the areas that we said, what is the loss to the economy on a per year basis if we do not move with technology. So at that time, as I'm talking about 10 years back, Plum Consulting said that you will be losing out $4 billion a year for the next 2 years if you do not hold 3G, 4G, or bring 3G, 4G technologies. So that's the kind of at that time, the loss to the economy was, and then all the benefits that there was. So the first thing that we need to do 5G is not because it's just a tagline that we need to put a 5G on the mobile, but it's also the wider economy that has an impact. And things like IoT and AI, data analytics, robotics, cloud computing. And why this is important is because it's in the next 2 points that I'm trying to bring out, that we will miss out on all those things that we as an IT industry, because I have for the last 10 years now more focus on the IT. So I know more about that, where people in Pakistan are working on those sectors. So if you do not have the test beds, we would be missing out on all these kind of things. The second most important thing is Pakistan. I think the most exportable commodity today is our human resource. We are a nation of 230 million people. We produce like 6 to 7 million people a year. And we need to produce talent and engineering services, and we provide that talent to the world, actually. We were the first few ones who adopted the mobile technology. And today, when I see in the industry, people like Aslam Hayat, Amir Ibrahim, and Irfan Wahab, they are products of that first mover mobile industry, where they have gone and made their mark in the, not only here in Pakistan, but the entire mobile industry around the globe. And so are, I know, so many other colleagues who came into the industry very early, and they were able to find jobs. And annually we are producing something around 25 to 30,000 IT and telecom graduates. So if we do not move the industry, these talent are going to be obsolete for the international industry, because today, as we speak, there are more than 200 plus 5G networks. And they need engineering resources. The world is looking for engineering resources. Only yesterday, Germany announced that they're going to look for talent in Africa. So we are competing, and we need to bring our human resource to that level, which is going to be easily employable. So if you're not worked on technologies, you are going to be left out. So that's one of the because today, if we see our biggest source of dollar coming in is people sending back money, actually, and we need to upgrade that and get those people out there. People say that if we export those people, we'll have brain drain. But I think with such a large country, I think that is not going to happen in Pakistan. We should focus on, training those people who have skills, who could go and, are easily employable around the world. The third point is because we primarily, as I said, last 10 years, I've focused more on the IT sector. We are exporting products and service in addition to providing software skills. If you see the last that the one of the most advantage that we had was, and the last biggest name that I could think of is Kareem, actually, which is a Pakistani-based startup that did really well. So it only yesterday, Etisalat has invested $400 million in that company, and so Pakistan, they have Pakistani founders. So those are the kind of high value things that would not be able to be produced in Pakistan if we do not embrace the technology road bandwagon. So those are the things that we need to, from a Pakistani perspective, we need to focus on, and why it's important for us to move ahead with technology. Now with that, I think, and I'm sure my other colleagues would have their own, reasoning why we need to have 5G. But I think these are very pertinent factors that plays a role why we need to move ahead with technology. Now, having said that, of course, there are challenges. The first big challenge is the spectrum allocation, and we have a history because Aslam Hayat here is a witness to that. We had this auction in 2004, which fetched the government of Pakistan 300 million each for 2 mobile operators. So that set the benchmark. But I see, those things were different. The economy was on the up, the GDP was good. There was a lot of room and growth and everything, and things were really moving ahead. And the unfortunate part is that, nobody since then has thought about, that, and in that perspective, we also, had to shift 3G, 4G for another 7 to 8 years because the return of investment was not there because the low ARPUs. And I would say much of the blame also goes to the mobile industry, that they were not able to arrest the competition that they had between themselves. But then there are other factors that does play here as well. So spectrum is like the oxygen for a mobile industry to grow, and spectrum allocation is the first thing that needs to come in. And unfortunately, we have pegged as the benchmark, and nobody is moving that benchmark now that we have a real crisis in the country, and we need to think out of the box on how we can make things easy for the mobile industry to move ahead. So once spectrum is allocated, then we come to the infrastructure part. Now, in other technologies, because of the low frequency bands that you are there, it's easy to probably much easier to have a rollout. But in 5G, because of the higher bandwidth that you generally would give to somebody, there would be more infrastructure requirement, and a requirement for investment increases, and that puts a lot of challenge on the operators. As Brigadier Saab mentioned, that we have these issue of dollarization, where the there's no dollar. There's a ban on LCs, which is hopefully is gonna smoothen up soon. But the larger economic things are, it makes it very difficult. And then we have these rollout obligation from the government that we have to go to rural areas as well. Not only, so we need to think through this because it makes it very difficult for somebody to roll out a nationwide 5G network. We still have a lot of blank spots on 4G even. So that is also an issue. We also need to think through the other things, which is the traffic offloading, because if you have a good 5G network or a very good network on the mobile industry, we also need to see how we can traffic offload to, and that's why the fiberization has to happen. And we need to also give some more spectrum to the Wi-Fi technology. So that is going to happen. And all these, and along with other things, this is a cost for the implementation and brings in a lot of challenges. So the challenges are there, and we need to see how we can mitigate those challenges. And I come to the last part, which is how can we do that? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to have a mindset, that we need to see the bigger picture of connectivity. That we should see all technologies growing. And the other thing that we need to see, especially for the government, is to not see this as a means to earn money upfront. Actually, that was the biggest roadblock when we were trying to deploy 3G, 4G in Pakistan. And the same is true when now we are talking about 5G, because the government has this, thinking that they could get some dollars out from the auction of the 5G spectrum. And they are looking at the benchmark that has been set previously, but now things have changed actually, and we need to have a different, mindset. And we need to think, out of the box actually. So if we need to try and facilitate and bring the deployment cost down through policy intervention, we are looking at reducing the cost of spectrum, or maybe giving it free of cost for the few initial years, so the operator doesn't have to worry about upfront money in terms of, and then maybe 3 years or 4, 5 years down the road, they could start, charging them a reasonable fee for that. The other out-of-box strategies could be, in Malaysia, I was speaking the other day to the regulator in Malaysia, and they have given an infrastructure and license, which then lease out the spectrum or the infrastructure to the mobile operators. Although the mobile operator doesn't like that, but I think that is one area that they could look at. The other things that
Sorry for interruption, but I'll just request if you can wrap up in next
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just this is my last slide, and so sorry for taking more time. The other strategies could be you can just mandate the mobile operator and say, okay, fine, we don't go for a nationwide rollout. Go and do it for 5 bigger cities and start with that for initial 2-3 years, or maybe 10 cities, and which makes perfect commercial sense for them. So it will reduce the cost of deployment for them. They would not have those rollout obligation. The other thing that you could say, okay, fine, let's do a rev share model. Maybe also give them some tax relief on the 5G infrastructure. So so you have to do all these kind of mix and match kind of strategies, but it needs that kind of leadership also, because the last time we had given 3G, 4G spectrum, there were NAP cases on the people who were involved, that they have given them their a much lower costing. So the issue is that the regulator is not ready to look at all these out of the box strategies or anything that results in a lower revenue for the government. So to end this discussion, we can look at a long-term and a medium-term strategy where we start off at least with the spectrum for 5G and maybe Wi-Fi, and because fiberization takes a long time, and that's an ongoing process, so we can do that. But the longer term vision should be that we should focus on the long-term benefit or digital transformation for the economy and the society. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for taking more time. I'm sure we have learned speakers, that would, throw more important light on this important subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. And I know the topic is very interesting, and 10 minutes is very limited time for this topic to be discussed. But I think we have initiated this important discussion, and we are going to continue with the series on this topic. And thank you for highlighting the key challenges and discussing the way forward, and also that we have to look at the broader picture that technology can bring to the country. With this, I would like to request our next speaker, Dr. Fariha Armagan, I'll request to please discuss how can Pakistan, as Brigadier Saab has already mentioned, that the current economic conditions, it's very difficult to adopt 5G in Pakistan. So in that scenario, how do you think can 5G be adopted to ensure digital and financial inclusion in Pakistan? What could be the pros and cons? Dr. Fariha Armagan.
Thank you very much, Zainab, for this opportunity. So yes, 5G has this phenomenal potential to actually bring a paradigm shift to the financial inclusion and the digital inclusion landscape of Pakistan. And I would like to quote a recent report by Deloitte here, 5G, the chance to lead for a decade, where it is mentioned that 5G tech will influence everything we do, from our daily routines to a tech revolution. And what 5G is going to bring into this paradigm is acceleration of or evolution of modern financial services, such as obtaining credit information, cloud computing, and of course, artificial intelligence. And many financial institutions are already de-emphasizing or debunking the idea of brick and mortar banking. Pandemic has accelerated this need, and financial institutions now focus on building a touchless, fast, easy to use customer experience. So 5G is definitely a leap forward in technology. However, Pakistan needs a strategic plan for it, where a number of financial institutions are embracing this technology, preparing for it. However, the rest of the financial industry is still wrestling with the idea that exactly how to become more mobile and tech savvy. And this introduction will definitely, or this acceleration of this footprint of how we can have a strategic plan around it in Pakistan will definitely contribute to the implementation of 5G in Pakistan. So when we talk about the landscape of Pakistan, it is very much needed for the financial inclusion of the impoverished in the rural areas and also in the urban areas. we have to factor in that only 21% of Pakistan is financially included, and the rest of the population lives in islands of social exclusion and islands of financial inclusion. And also, a contrary fact is that we are definitely a tech-savvy nation. The mobile adoption is a lot, while physical access to bank is low. However, there is a mobile device in every or majority of the households in Pakistan. And this 5G innovation coupled with banking sector collaboration can actually bring an unprecedented outreach to these population. And especially we have to consider that after pandemic, it's no more business as usual poverty alleviation. We have to move the needle on this, and we have to bring this population through a full circle of financial inclusion. We have to make them transition from the very first pillar of saving, then to borrowing, then to making digital transactions, and ultimately to insurance. And there is no better tool than actually combining mobile devices with a very fast track and refined tech like 5G. And only this way we can make this population resilient. And we have to make them resilient. I mean, COVID has taught us this lesson that they have to survive in the face of a catastrophe, in the face of inflation, in the face of crisis. So they need to be part of active economy, and for that they have to be looped into the economy. And the very first step is making digital transaction. And we also have to understand that yes, we do have very low digital literacy, we have very low financial literacy, but Pakistan has the population, and especially the economically disadvantaged population, they have proven over time that learning by doing and hit and trial mechanism works. So they have adopted to this digital inclusion. And a very good example is how BISP handed over ATMs to illiterate population, yet they adopted over time and became street smart and actually now accessing microfinance and financial sector after going through the program for a number of years. So they need to be part of the active economy, and digital transaction facilitated by 5G is definitely going to work. And also we need to also put weight to this fact that 5G innovations are going to actually enhance the digital maturity metrics for Pakistan. Right now, if we see where do we stand in the digital maturity metrics of Pakistan, we are somewhere in the middle of premature digital to base digital. And to reach this next stage of digital plus, where a number of developing countries are operating. We have a good example of developing country like Kenya that actually accelerated financial inclusion to 90% through this digital inclusion innovation. And again, that was all enhanced by very smart and refined digital payment gateways at the back end, of course, facilitated by technology. So we need to understand that right now we have a low tech and high touch spectrum in terms of digital inclusion in Pakistan. It's just that they are able to understand a low level of technology, and more convenience is around a high touch or physical encounter. So we need to transition from this spectrum to other way around, which is high tech and low touch. And 5G will be a catalyst to this innovation. And this digital payment gateway, the mobile wallet apps, the interoperability, and also credit evaluation algorithms, credit disbursements, these are the tools and the channels to reach out to mass population. And any drive of digital and financial inclusion will definitely need such high-tech paradigms like 5G. So we, however, we need to just like chalk out our roadmap for our digital transition facilitated by 5G, how we are going to go about it. And there must be facilitation by the stakeholder and government to enable the financial sector and the banking sector under the National Financial Inclusion Strategy agenda. I mean, must be built in and considered as one of the options. So I think so. I would end here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fariha. And interesting to learn that 21% of Pakistan is only financially included. But 5G innovation can enhance the digital maturity metrics in Pakistan. I think that's a key strategy that we can integrate within the digital transformation strategy for Pakistan. So with this, I would like to request the next speaker, Mr. Aslam Hayat. Sir, my question would be to please, if you can emphasize upon the policy and regulatory framework needed by the ICT industry in Pakistan to adopt the 5G in the country. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Zainab. I hope everybody can see the presentation. Just following up on what Khalid Bhai and Dr. Faria mentioned, there are a lot of advantages on the HR side, on financial inclusion, on efficiencies. But I would like to take a slightly different angle for 5G, and that is the climate change. Because this is a concern which is impacting many countries, and Pakistan is among the top 10 in the list of the countries which are badly affected by climate change, and then see that how 5G can help over there. So my agenda or points of discussions are basically the impact and what 5G can do on this issue. And if there are any negative impact of introducing 5G on the environment, then we need to be mindful of that and address those. And then eventually, the most important part is that what we are going to do for introducing 5G in Pakistan and how we can have maximize the benefits. So this is the two countries, stories of two countries in the Pacific. I have worked there in one of my assignments for 2 years in the Pacific. I've been to those places, Tuvalu and Kiribati. Unfortunately, we do not really see the true impact of climate change. We only see that some island is going down. For example, Maldives is something which we are familiar with. But if you go to those places where the sea level is rising, and those countries are actually losing their territory. Tuvalu has almost lost 50% of its territory. Kiribati also has even more impact. Their houses are underwater and their populations are displaced. And if you look at Pakistan, I mean, it's, as I mentioned, it's among the top 10 countries. And we are seeing those changes in the climate, rain and floods, and you name it, the catastrophes are more. The total impact we are having on the global footprint is just 0.8%, whereas we are among the top 10 countries who are firstly affected by this. So 5G has a promise towards climate change. Again, I'm not suggesting that 5G is the only solution and 5G is the silver bullet. It is not. But the kind of challenge which we are facing, we need to incorporate the aspect of environment or climate change into every policy, every action we make. Because we are the worstly affected. If we don't do anything ourselves, I don't think anybody from outside is going to come and help us. So if you look at 5G, it's basically different reports are suggesting that Ericsson says that this is going to have 2.5 billion subscriptions by next year. And with the IoT and the efficiency this will bring, it will have a 15% reduction on the carbon emission in 2030. Similarly, Sun Microsystems says that the major part of the carbon footprint of an employee is basically going to office or going to meetings or traveling for a business outside the country or within the country by air. So that is 98%. So if you have got 5G and then you don't need, and we have seen during COVID that it was possible. The only challenge was that the network qualities was not very good. But if you have got 5G, and the latency is around 1 millisecond, it's as good as sitting in office, and you are going to save this 98% of the carbon footprint. So similarly, there have been pilot projects about smart traffic controls, and very, very promising results over there in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of a reduction in travel. And one of the founders of IoT, Mr. Paul, he actually said that 5G is the first carbon neutral network. The technology leaders, Huawei, Nokia, and Ericsson, and Qualcomm, they have come up with their own studies, and they are also emphasizing the sustainability aspect of 5G, that how green it would be, what kind of efficiency it is going to bring in into every aspect of the life, infrastructure, vehicle, remote working. And academia also have their predictions about it. For example, as University of Zurich, they're clearly saying that it is going to reduce the emissions with the unit of data. The Atlantic report, can 5G save the planet? It's also heavily discuss the impact it is going to have on the efficiency. For example, what they are saying that 1 kilowatt hours of electricity on a 4G actually gives you about 300 high definition movies in an hour, whereas 5G is going to give you 5,000. So that is the kind of efficiency is going. This is one example. And then the other academia professor, he said that 5G is going to actually help us with 4 Ds. What is decentralization, decarbonization, digitalization, and democratization. And if you look at the advantages, as by all these reports, I've summed up that there are basically 5 main advantages which we are getting out of 5G if we introduce it. One is the increased energy efficiency. Second is that we will have a better resource management because there will be a lot of sensors available, all the IoT's network, and then you have got artificial intelligence. Machines are talking to each other. If there is a leakage somewhere of water, if there is a challenge with traffic lights, so all those things would be real-time available, and you can actually better manage those resources. Similarly, the greenhouse emissions, again, through those sensors and traffic management and smart transportation solutions, you can actually reduce that also. And as a result, there will be a better quality of air which we breathe in. And then because of those adoptions of renewable energies, there will be a better environment where we can all have a better quality of life. But this does not mean that there are all advantages and there are no disadvantages. And I think it's extremely important that we are planning, when we are planning for 5G, we need to understand what are the disadvantages also so that we can mitigate those and reduce their impact. So 5G network basically means more denser network, more impact on the, or more burden on the electricity consumption based on the spectrum which we were using. So there will be increased consumption. People will have to move their devices from 3G, 4G to 5G, and not every 3G, 4G enabled device is 5G enabled. And that will increase a lot of e-waste. And we need to have those policies in place, how we are going to handle this. Similarly, the impact of this infrastructure, it's more dense infrastructure, which means more pollution, more eyesore in the cities. There is likely to have an impact on wildlife if you cover all the areas. That includes, for example, Magla Hills and other reserve areas where you need to increase your footprint. And then the ecosystem would also be impacted. especially the natural habitat of the animals. And there are a lot of noise about the health concerns of 5G. Although there are reports that it's not has a direct impact on the health, but there probably is a communication strategy to actually talk about it, because people are still concerned about the long-term impact or effect of 5G technologies and the emissions from the towers. So here are some of the numbers about those disadvantages. This IT and Innovation Foundation actually says that the current global electricity consumption of telecom networks is about 4%. And the carbon emission is about 1.4%. But this is going to change significantly because there will be more than 2 billion subscribers, and there will be 125 billion IoT devices connected to the 5G. And that would mean, if these predictions are correct, that would mean that there will be a 20% of all global electricity consumption on the telecom or IT networks. And there will be 14% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. So those are serious numbers. And then we have to be very, very careful about what we are doing. And similarly, we should not forget about data centers, because higher the speed, the more data consumption and more storage of data centers or of data would be required. And basically, those data centers consume almost 80% of the total network consumption. And in the US alone, in 2014, there was about 70 billion kilowatt hours, which is going to increase by 73 billion next year. And then, of course, those towers, structures, which is visual pollution, when you see a denser network with a very short separation of those towers. So that also is going to be a challenge. So coming to the last slide, I think for Pakistan, especially for this for 5G and then the impact of this climate change, we need to have some incentive for the mobile network operators, because for them, currently, if the customers are only using internet for communication and entertainment, 4G is good enough. So you need to incentivize them to actually move toward 5G. You have to de-link the spectrum price from USD. Unfortunately, what we are seeing now is that irrespective of that, all the operators are earning in rupees, they are still forced to pay in US dollars, knowing very well that the benchmarks which was set for spectrum pricing back in 2004, the dollar was 60 rupees. When it came for 2014, that benchmark of 2004 continued, whereas the dollar was above 100. And now what we are seeing in renewal, the license renewal of all those operators who got those 15 years license back in 2004, they have to pay for spectrum at more than 250 rupees. So this linkage alone is making the spectrum very, very expensive for those operators. So whenever we are introducing this information memorandum and the roadmap or the document or the policy for 5G, we need to also incorporate those green goals into those. We need to also have renewable energy targets as part of those obligations. And then, of course, allocation of the right spectrum. The rollout, what we are hearing from the operators, that even if they are forced to have 5G in Pakistan, they will only have kind of symbolic in 1 or 2 parts of the city, key areas, and that's it, and nothing more than that. So you need to have some incentive for them to actually early roll out, give it to a larger population. And then most important is that you need to have some sort of initiatives or a policy plan for handling e-waste. So currently, if you are having this almost 50% of the total subscriber base is having 5G or 3G or 4G devices, which are not 5G enabled. So those are kind of the handset they will toss away when they will buy a new 5G handset. So we need to make sure that we have got those capabilities to handle that toxic waste. Last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, that if you're only using this 5G for communication and entertainment, I don't see a use case for these mobile operators or an incentive to pay higher price for spectrum, have a nationwide rollout, and still the consumption or the demand from the customer would remain the same. So on the national level, we need to come up with the demand side policy. We have been working on the supply side for quite some time. If you look at 2003 deregulation policy, if you look at 2014 telecom policy, it all talk about the infrastructure, it talk about the supply of services, whereas the demand has to be created. We need to focus on the use cases. We need to focus on health sector where we can have use cases where you need low latency. Agriculture is another area. Transportation is another area. You have got IoT. And currently you have got gaming as one of the use cases which is proven, where the players need real time and not even a latency of 2 or 3 milliseconds. So we need to come out with this demand side. So then there is a clear visibility for the mobile operators and the users to go for an early adoption of 5G, because they will see those benefits, which is something more than what they can get out of 4G. So that's why I think this is one of the most important areas to focus from both on the policy level and on the regulation level. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the way forward and also for mentioning that we need to come up with a demand side policy. I've recently learned that South Korea is actually implementing subsidies for the telecom industry to develop the infrastructure for 5G networks in the country. So I think that's something doable for our country as well as we develop these kind of policies. Before I request the next speaker, I would like to request Ms. Mariam Shabir, as it's getting extremely late in the USA, to please discuss the environmental policy side and the policy angle in context to Pakistan if 5G gets adopted, and what could be the implications. And also, before coming to Mariam, I'll request our speakers if they can please limit their speech within 10 minutes, because we have to also take up one-liner recommendations, which could be added in the policy brief that we'll be developing after this webinar. Thank you. Over to you, Mariam.
Thank you, Zainab, and very learned presentations by all the speakers. I have learned a lot of technical things related to 5G too. Since most of the part related to environment and climate change has been covered by our respective previous speakers, so I'll skip all that part and won't repeat for the audiences too. But I would like to mention few points related to that. Of course, there is like always pros and cons of any initiative or any technology, I would say, is always there. But when I look at 5G, it has like more benefits for every country, including Pakistan too. And through innovation, conservation, and intelligence, the combination of all this, there can be a lot of benefits for Pakistan to harness from the existing markets, especially in China. They are experimenting that, and we do have like good relationships, so to say, with China when it comes to CPAC2, and we can coordinate with them too. So is Japan. We can, establish links with them, and civil society organizations like SDPI and our government organizations can, build a pathway after developing research and giving policy recommendations to the government that how can they can go about it. So the policy change, I guess when it comes to policy, I always say that we have like a lot of policies on plate and very few are being implemented. But of course, the technical panelists over here can tell better what kind of policies can be more relevant when it comes to 5G. But when it comes to the environment, the biggest advantage which I see with the adoption of 5G in Pakistan is that it will significantly reduce e-waste. And why I'm saying is that so far, the developed world has like 4G and 5G technology in place, and they dump all their e-waste in Asia, including Pakistan. Pakistan is the best market for them to, to dump their e-waste, including computers, which are like not used over there in their countries, mobiles which are not being used in their countries, and they just send that to Pakistan and other Asian countries, and that would significantly reduce. But also, we also need like infrastructure and also kind of coordination between different departments, of the government to really sit down and see that how they would be working. Because what we do is that, for example, when there was this policy related to electric cars, Ministry of Climate Change in Pakistan wanted to bring 30% electric cars by 2030. But on the other end, when we looked at the policies and set up, by Energy Minister and the Petroleum Ministry, they were like going on the other side. So it's really important for them to sit down and, draw a way forward and pattern that how they should overcome the conflict and set a path which should benefit all the departments, and we should not, go against one department or, supersede another department. That kind of fear should go away in order to, establish such markets. And they're like by combining artificial intelligence and innovation, of course, there can be a lot of potential for different industries in Pakistan too, where 5G technology can do wonders. And one of the most important is this telematics systems in car, when that can be combined, and that has been experimented in the US, of course. And what they observed is that when they introduced this system in their cars, it was very easy to monitor how much emissions were, being contributing into the environment by the car, and how, directions can be guided to the drivers to opt path while traveling. So that also reduces kind of energy consumption and carbon footprints by the transportation sectors. And if that is widely, adopted in Pakistan too, that can also reduce air pollution in Pakistan, as Mr. Aslam Hayat also mentioned in his presentation. And there are like a lot of other AI, artificial intelligence enabled solutions for energy efficiency in a lot of other sectors. For example, one of the EU country, they have like adopted this wireless low power wide area network protocol technology that basically monitors energy consumption in the industry, and they introduced that in the civil industry, and that was very helpful to monitor that when there was like the energy consumption was crossing the threshold limit, so it was giving kind of alarm to the industry and to its machinery, kind of that that it's exceeding its limit in a certain time to it's contributing more towards emissions, so they have to control their carbon dioxide emissions. So of course this 5G technology, and that of course needs infrastructure in Pakistan too, as previous speakers mentioned, that is really needed for our climatic events like floods, heat waves, and other extreme events. And by having right infrastructure and right bandwidth, the early warning system can be improved in Pakistan, and the evacuation during floods can be made possible on time, and that I think needs a lot of good market and economy, and unfortunately, Pakistan is going through a rough patch. And I really hope and pray that we get over this political instability in Pakistan, so that investors from outside Pakistan could be entrusted to invest in Pakistan. And another thing is that the energy efficiency. Normally, the most energy required by establishing this 5G network is when this base camp related to 5G technology is established. That's where the most of the energy is wasted. So that can be taken care of by at three levels. One is at network level, the second is at equipment level, and third is at site level. By choosing network level bandwidth, equipment level, how much machinery and equipment we require, and the site level, what kind of site we are choosing, how that can benefit. So, there are like a lot of options, as I mentioned, through innovation and conservation intelligence, that, it can really help conserve energy. For example, when, there's like in 5G, wireless cells can automatically shut down when there's like no data traffic, traffic, and such techniques can shrink base station energy use by 40%. So there's like a lot that can be done, and I believe that civil society organizations such as SDPI can do research in partnership with telecom industries and sectors in Pakistan to help government that how they can harness from their friendly countries and through MOUs and all, and that can really open good markets. And as there are like challenges and harshes, but that is also like kind of opportunity for Pakistan to harness this potential. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mariam, for summarizing the key benefits in the environment sector that 5G can bring to Pakistan. With this, I would like to request our next speaker, Mr. Omar Malik. Since you are from the Ministry of Telecom in Pakistan and you're representing the public sector here, so I would like to request, what is your take, without asking any technical question, just your take on how the 5G can be adopted in Pakistan, and what regulatory framework can enable its adoption in the country. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Zainab, and quite appreciable for inviting me for such an important topic over here that is being discussed for the last couple of months. I'll give a bit holistic view, like what exactly happened, where we stand, and what exactly is our future strategy, and what exactly today we are working on it today. So I need to go into a bit of background, but before jumping into the 5G strategy and the readiness, I'll stick to the topic related to the environmental impacts of different variants on 5G. We, as a ministry, basically, there are certain international frameworks under the United Nations on climate change, and also the Paris Agreement on limiting the greenhouse emission and the CO2 emission, where there are conditions on countries which are members to have the temperature and decarbonization to be 1.5 degrees centigrade back to the Industrial Revolution. And the telecom industry is one of the critical industry that is part of it, and the same applies on it. If you see the research of the European Commission and the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, the report they have recently presented that in the last 25 years, we have a 200% increase in carbon and CO2 emissions in Pakistan, which is quite alarming. And ICT sector, not only telecom, but the sectors related to the ICT data centers, the devices, plus, the dumping of the equipments in Pakistan, all contributes towards that, not only the telecom towers and the infrastructure as well. So I'll come to the way forward instead of discussing the problem more, that what we analyze and how we can analyze the situation and can solve it. In 5G adaptation relating to the environmental aspects, like there are 6 vertical roadmap scenarios which we have studied in the last 2 years. I'll jump into it one by one, like the assessment of the environmental impacts. That is very important before concluding anything. The second one is to develop a sustainable strategy based on the assessment and the environmental impacts. Then the third one is to foster public-private partnership to materialize that. The fourth one is promote energy efficiency. Then to encourage sustainable transport, which we have already discussed as well. And the last and the important one is to increase the renewable energy use in Pakistan. So these all 6 verticals are related to telecom. Now I'll come on the steps in the solid tangible move which ministry and the policy level which we have conducted. It's not only limited to just assessment stuff which we conducted last year, but the important factor which the Paris Accord Agreement says, and the International Greenhouse Gas Emission ITU recommendation, that is the sharing of the resources. So we first focus on the low-hanging fruits where we can impact directly and immediately, instead of going for a long and midterm strategy interventions. So immediately we jumped into one of the important spectrum sharing regime that is under finalization and under draft. Sharing of spectrum by the telcos has a very clear impact. Apart from the infrastructure sharing framework that will converge the infrastructure of the ICT and the telecom into one entity. Right now, the situation in Pakistan, I'm not going to compare that with Europe or US or anywhere in the Middle East as well, but to be very concise, anybody who has traveled on motorways or any cities, you'll see 4 to 5 towers erected next to each other in certain dense urban population, even on the motorways, highways. So that is something like we need to cut short. Infrastructure sharing framework is coming up. That's going to address that. It's under approval of the federal cabinet. It has been finalized by the industry, by all the concerned stakeholders after consultation. So that was one step we have been working on. Apart from infrastructure sharing, I mentioned, like, you know, if you travel from Karachi or Gwadar to Skardu, like you're going to need 5 SIM cards. Why it is like that, and why this problem is contributing to the environmental factor as well. There's a big impact, by the way, and we are introducing national roaming on highways. So a single user moving from Gwadar to Skardu, let's say, shall only require only 1 SIM card. That's because, you know, the infrastructure, that is active infrastructure I'm talking about over here, that will be shared, resource shared. So it was very important, like to conduct that. Otherwise, like, you know, due to the geographical area and the population, sparse population, it's not possible, like, for each and every operator to provide, you know, 100% services all over the Pakistan. This is not possible at the moment. But we have been working on it, and you will see all these things coming up very shortly under final approval. Consultation has been completed. So these are the environmental aspects, 6 verticals I've mentioned with the way forward, the solutions, and what government and the Ministry of IT has been working on with the industry on the same. I would now love to go back to the certain questions or certain, you know, queries that has been discussed by my fellow colleagues related to 5G readiness plan and when we're going to launch the 5G network in Pakistan. That's the question. which we have been hearing from everybody, and what should be the policy measures, policy interventions, what should be the direction. Many of the audience and many of the colleagues, they were talking about incentives, rebates, moratoriums, obligations, rollout moratoriums, plus some of the exemption on the spectrum pricing to give the spectrum free for 2 to 3 years for a certain duration. These models we have studied. But I'll just go back to our first colleague that initiated the talk initially, mentioning the showstoppers initially being faced and that's being perceived by the industry. One was the 4G penetration in Pakistan, which is less. So that I've heard from here. Secondly, the optic fiber penetration that is not at par excellence to launch the 5G networks in Pakistan. This was a second concern. The third one was the device availability and the affordability for the 5G network. So this was also, I was hearing from my colleagues, which were very well said. Then we have the spectrum pricing and the dynamics of spectrum auction, including the pricing in PKR or USD. One of our colleague, I think so Mr. Aslam had mentioned it as well. And then the sharing of the 5G resources. This is another step. I'll go into details like in 2021, with the help of the World Bank, we have conducted a study with all the industry stakeholders that were domestic over here in Pakistan, as well as internal and external stakeholders and the manufacturers of the 5G and the suppliers of the 5G networks all over the world. And we studied almost like 165 networks to conclude, how we can effectively launch 5G in Pakistan as per our economic dynamics, as per our per capita income. That is very important over here to discuss. Affordability is an important factor that we sometimes miss to discuss because 5G is not just like rolling out the 4G network or a 3G network. It's a bit different. It's an entirely different ecosystem compared to 2G, 3G, 4G technology. So the differences we need to understand in the type of capital investment, CapEx and OpEx for 5G, and the current infrastructure situation in Pakistan, that we first need to analyze, which we have done that. If you see European and Middle Eastern and some of the Far Eastern countries, like there was a reason that they have sunset certain technologies, either 3G technologies, while they were going for the 5G technology. Over here, like I have been hearing, like to launch 5G with the 2G and the 3G and the 4G technology. This is something, everybody talks about it, and that contributes to the OpEx and eventually impacts the ARPUs and the revenues of the telcos, which some ignores. And that's not something a positive approach, like if we go in that direction. Now, for the 5G readiness, after conducting the study with all the stakeholders, including World Bank, as I mentioned, we came up with certain conclusions for the readiness plan. By the way, that is available on our Ministry of IT website. Anybody can download it from there. The first point was to make the spectrum available in Pakistan for 5G, either for standalone and non-standalone, interoperable or operatable frequencies. Now, in 2022, recently through Frequency Allocation Board and with the stakeholders, the spectrum in 2.3, 2.4, 2.6 gigahertz, 3.5 gigahertz plus 26, 40, 60 to 90 gigahertz. That is for the backhaul, 70 to 80. That is now made available for multiple stakeholders and available for the commercial use in Pakistan. That was never being available. The second step I have discussed with the industry and the feedbacks which we have received. Even Mr. Yassin Saab has also mentioned that, like the fiber penetration in Pakistan is less. As I speak today, like the fiber penetration in Pakistan is approximately 13%, That means like fiber connectivity to the towers. In 2 years, the fiber total deployment in Pakistan was 124,000 kilometers. In order to increase that, certain policy interventions were taken and the license regimes were opened, including, the TIP license, the telecom infrastructure license, the telecom tower provider licenses, and the long distance international regime was opened. That was freezed, by the way, for the last 10 years. Once in 2020, these were opened. Now, as I speak today, the optic fiber penetration in Pakistan is 190,000 kilometers in just 2 years. So you can well imagine the potential of optic fiber demand in Pakistan, specifically for the users, since only we have almost like less than 2% penetration or tele-density of the fixed and broadband customers, which is very less as compared to the rest of the world. So that needs to be scaled down. But I will slightly disagree to one of the point, like in order to have the 5G launch in Pakistan, there's a dire need of optic fiber connectivity to the towers, almost each and every tower. In 2020 and 2021, since the technology is evolving too much and our audience is from all over the world, so I will straight away come to the point, like in spectrum frequency band of 70 to 80 gigahertz, the backhaul gives the throughput of almost 25 Gbps. So condition of optic fiber to each and every site, except hub site, is not that much valid as we are discussing the readiness step in Pakistan today. So the alternate technologies available. For that, I have 10,000 megahertz of spectrum available, which is far more than what we need in Pakistan for launching of 5G. Especially we discussed the showstopper and the obstacles for backhaul. 10,000 megahertz available through Fab board. For the front end, that's the RF spectrum. I've already mentioned that, so I'm not going to repeat it again. That is also available for standalone and not non-standalone as well. We had multiple issues in the past. The right of way policy was not there. Now, to a greater extent, that has been approved and in place practically on ground. The spectrum rolling strategy is also available on the ministry website. Then we have, Internet of Things framework, as one of my colleagues, Mr. Aslam, had mentioned about it. More than 10 companies got the license already. We had made the spectrum and the frequencies for long haul and short haul free on that particular framework. Anybody can get the license in such a cheap price, which is surprising, and the details are also available on PTA website. So this has been opened. One of my colleagues also mentioned about, the 5G test bed ecosystem where anybody can go and test the 5G, business cases in Pakistan. That's very important. Just like a couple of months back in the National University of Science and Technology, with the help of academia, industry, and the government, the test bed was deployed through one of our partner, I'll say Jazz, NUST, academia, and the government, and it's open for students, startups, and any of the enterprise and SMEs to test their business cases for 5G in Pakistan, and that's up and running. On the other side, all 4 cellular mobile operators have tested 5G networks in Pakistan for the commercial launch as well. We had, one of the tough challenge about device affordability, seeing the per capita income of each Pakistani. So device manufacturing was very important, and 31 licenses were issued. 16 units were operational in Pakistan. Last year production, I can say it was 25 million domestic smart devices production, including feature phones. And once all these units will be operational, 31 units, It's almost like 50 million devices each year. Out of that, the current tele density or penetration of 5G devices is approximately 4.5% in Pakistan. But the major factor is affordability to launch it successfully. One of our colleagues mentioned about, the business cases for 5G is not that much conducive as per our environment, seeing the incomes affordability. I'll also slightly disagree to that. Reason being, like 5G is not something a mobile technology or a smart device technology anymore. That's a complete digital ecosystem, including all the emerging technologies, which one of my Australian colleague, I believe so, Mr. Rahman from Australia, or somebody mentioned that it's a blend of IoT, AR, VR, Wi-Fi 6E. Somebody has mentioned, yes, the framework is coming up for that on 3.5 gigahertz frequency. That's under completion. So it's the complete inclusion of all these things. So these basic reservations which industry and which were important for the launch of 5G networks were more or less addressed. Now we are at the stage where we are looking on the overall country economic dynamics and the financial situation where it's more conducive for investors to invest on the technology. The purpose is not to have a partial step-by-step approach for only 2, 3, 4, 5 cities, just to launch few towers with the 5G technology, but to include the complete digital inclusion in the Pakistan economy. And for sure, like the contribution for 5G, one of my colleagues said, like it's almost like in 2 to 3 years, we can say like it's approximately $4 to $5 billion US in terms of GDP contribution. That's something, an attractive proposition. In 2021-22, like we had $2.1 billion investment in the telecom sector only. In the last 5 years, like $6.7 billion USD we had in the telecom sector. The important step for launching 5G now is like, a conducive environment for telcos, where they feel, a stable investment and return on investment. That is their basic concern at the moment. And majorly, the comments we receive is about the rupee to dollar parity, basically the stability in the rupee value against the dollar. Because for investors, they straight away look for the returns, ROIs, and the ARPUs. The step which we have taken for the ARPUs, one of my colleagues also mentioned about that. It's very low in Pakistan compared to the region at 0.98 USD. That also needs to be addressed. It's not something, just we head towards the 5G network. By the way, I've launched 2 5G networks globally. The first one failed as well. There were reasons and good experiences as well, which we gained. In Pakistan, like the subscriber base has been increased by all the telcos a lot. CMOs I'm talking about at the moment. That was the primarily focus. Prepaid subscribers and the subscriber base. The shares you can just check from the PTA website for each and every operator. It's available. But that is not something very positive approach in terms of digital inclusion only by increasing the subscriber base while putting aside the fintech, postpaid customers, value-added services, and the TMT on the other side. If you see like in Australia, in US, some of my colleagues are from there, and even in the Middle East, telecom is not only treated now as a pipe for data transfer anymore. Still over here, the strategy is towards like provisioning of data services. That's not enough. So evolution from, traditional telecom industry to a digital, fully inclusive model that includes 5G ecosystem is basically the demand, and that's why we are here. Apart from the environmental factors, which I've already mentioned, and how we can achieve that successfully. Launching something without any, positive impact has no value, to be honest. Just for the sake of wishes of all the people, like we must launch it, and that's not bringing any positive thing to the citizens of Pakistan, will not be positive stuff. Basically, once we formulate the policy directive, it's based on 3 verticals we discussed multiple times. Like, the first priority is the citizens of Pakistan. The second priority is, or the vertical, is the industrial growth and the economy. And the third priority, while making the policy, is the coming to Pakistan. So we need to align all these things together in our framework and readiness plan uploaded on the ministry website. You can see all the reservations, showstoppers, and the way forward for that. Hopefully, now we are in a position, once the things become more stable, to launch that, commercially launch that 5G networks in Pakistan with the business cases and with all these financial inclusions. So I'll close my discussion on that, because it's a very long, if you go in details on each and every topic, I think so we can go for hours and hours of discussion. And even if there are questions related to the ministry or the governments, feel free for that. And thanks a lot, and thank you very much. Quite appreciable. Quite appreciable.
Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the basically the government's perspective on 5G, and also for highlighting the 5G readiness report, that study that was conducted with World Bank. I think we can all have a look at that report and work out a strategy for a more environmental friendly 5G adoption, if it ever gets adopted in Pakistan. And also SDPI will be preparing a brief on this after the webinar, and we would like you to have a look at the brief, and if the recommendations can be taken up by the government, and if our recommendations can be included, I think that would be a more inclusive approach towards adopting this kind of technology. Thank you for your time. And now I would like to request our next speaker, Mr. Fawad Server, for his opinion on the overall discussion that we have done on 5G adoption in Pakistan and its environmental implications. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Zainab, and Assalamu alaikum all. I'll share my screen now. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, first of all, thanks for having me. So just in a couple of sentences, so my background is purely from technology. So I'm a graduate of NUST, EME College, and then I had a couple of master's degrees from Australia, including master's in engineering and MBA. And then now I have got around 15 years of experience in both leadership and technical roles with Ericsson, and 5 years with other operators and vendors. So I would like to fully agree with Mr. Omar, what he said. So 5G is to us, as a vendor, we are observing this as a game changer. Why? Because it has got a lot of monetization use cases, and also it has got a huge implications for the environment, where it can positively impact the environment. So how it's going to impact, let's go through step-by-step change. Step-by-step, so to understand the 5G, first of all, why 5G is different to 4G. It's different because it has got multiple bands. So basically, I won't go into too much technical details, but it has got low band, mid band, and high band, which has got different coverage, bandwidth, and latency parameters, and which are suitable to high capacity and medium capacity and low and wide coverage areas. So in that perspective, and when I say high band, it has got a millimeter wave, which has never been used in 4G before, or 3G before even. So I started actually my career from 3G onwards, in Australia. So I have seen the evolution of these technologies. So that's why 5G we think is a game changer, and we'll see in the upcoming slides how. So I'll try to stick to around 15 minutes, but let's see how we go. So agenda is I'll go through the introduction in context of the climate change, how 5G is a game changer in this context, breaking the energy curve. What does this mean actually from Ericsson perspective? And then sustainable network, and then we have got exponential roadmap 2030, 5G and IoT applications in context of smart city, fleet, and construction industries. I'll demonstrate some examples, and then communication service providers, which are the mobile network operators, what strategies they can have for energy efficiencies and greenhouse gas reductions. So the slide is very texty, but I'll go through very quickly through the introduction. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, actually, the scientists gathered today, and they have raised alarms that the global warming crisis is getting out of control. And during the last industrial revolution, the Earth temperature has risen by 1.1%. And that's why they have given a responsibility to the tech industry as well, and observe where the tech industry actually disrupts other industries. So in Australia, what we have seen is we have seen some unprecedented heat waves, unexpected rains and flash flooding, snowfalls and bushfires, to name a few, in the last few years. And that's why we are heavily capitalizing on this technology, how it impacts the climate change. And hence Australian government and companies are actually under intense pressure to transform the way energy and materials are generated and consumed to quickly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So the target is to reduce the global greenhouse gas emissions by half until 2020, and then achieve the net zero by 2050. So how it's a game changer? So 5G, what we anticipate is a built on most energy aware standard to date. How? We will cover in the upcoming slides. Breaking the curve. What exactly breaking the curve means? Breaking the curve means if we roll out 5G in the same way we have rolled out 3G and 4G, regardless in any country, then energy expense is going to exponentially increase, and that's going to have a huge impact on the greenhouse gas emissions. Ericsson thinks that we will be able to break the energy curve through, and approaches are discussed in the upcoming slides. So the mobile network operators have estimated that their energy consumption will double because the customers are data hungry. So with the increasing volumes of the data traffic, we need to disrupt and break the energy curve. So the challenges for the mobile network operators are that they need to have adequate coverage capacity and throughput while managing network complexity and interoperability, because in 5G more bands are being added in the spectrum, balancing cost and profitability, and the technical and operational complexities. So what does exactly net zero mean? So net zero means that for all the greenhouse gas emissions emitted, the same amount is absorbed back from the atmosphere. So that's what the Ericsson is trying to participate in and facilitate, to achieve net zero by 2050. So exponential roadmap 2030. So in terms of 5G is not alone, as I fully agree to Mr. Omar, what he said, it's a complete rejuvenation and rehauling of the ecosystem. So ecosystem means telco is not alone. It's integrated and along with the rest of the IT, and collectively we can call it as ICT. And that includes the IoT, that includes the artificial intelligence, data analytics, all these sort of technologies. So the digital sector is responsible for just 1.4% of the global emissions, but it has an outsized influence on the exponential transformation to 50% emissions by 2030. Why? Because the digitalization will disrupt all industries across the globe. And that's where the 5G is getting very instrumental. Digital services have potential with tenfold their own footprint to reduce the energy. So this exponential roadmap of 2030, the report consists of three main blocks, and the ambition is to not let the temperature increase more than 1.5 degree centigrade in the next decade with the transformation of various industries. And they have proposed 36 solutions to cut the greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. So I'll go through some of the IoT use cases, and then I'll comment briefly how these use cases are actually contributing to climate change, and how, and of course, adoption of 5G pucks and can go on the similar path. So in terms of the IoT smart cities, smart cities are basically, we can use 5G with the enablement of IoT, AI, ML, and data analytics to reduce the traffic tenfold. And why are we saying this? Because we can employ massive IoT and critical IoT. And in massive and critical IoT, we can have IoT sensors where basically they are continuously providing the data for better traffic management to reduce the congestion on the roads. And then vehicle to infrastructure and vehicle to vehicle communication. So Ericsson thinks like anything which gets benefit from connectivity will get connected in the next few years. And that's where the IoT comes in the picture. IoT enables smart traffic lights because they will continuously gather the traffic data and they will optimize the data back in the cloud, and it will control the traffic congestion, and commute behaviors of subscribers will change. So already in Beeline is a crowdsourced best service app, which is being used in Singapore as part of IoT ecosystem, where basically routes based on community demand and transportation data are analyzed, and they are optimized, creating an adaptive transportation network that changes in step with the city needs. So this is already in use in Singapore. The next one I'll go through very quickly is the 5G IoT enablement for the fleet system. So in Australia, this is already offered by Telstra as a capability for being a service provider, where they are basically offering the smart and innovative fleet management solutions to help run a smarter fleet, increasing energy, particularly in context of increasing efficiency in context of energy. So here you can see that they are making, it can facilitate in making daily scheduling easier, delivering on customer promises, automating the workflows, impacting the decisions, where we can gather more actionable insights, ensuring driver safety and more resilient fleet. So in the construction industry, again, IoT has got a huge impact. I'll go through very quickly, like autonomous vehicles, concrete curing even. So for example, like this point where it's showing the concrete curing. So IoT sensors are actually embedded when the concrete is being casted. So then it provides information that how the infrastructure is aging, how it's getting weak, under which environmental circumstances or weather conditions. So that's a huge gain in terms of okay, whether we need to deploy machinery or manpower, or whether we need to reconstruct or refurbish or whatever. So it has got a huge implication there. Now, even though mobile operators, they have got a small contribution in the carbon footprint, but I'll go through some of the strategies what the mobile network operators can go with for breaking the energy curve. So Ericsson proposes that a three-pronged approach. The first is the sustainable network evolution, which is embracing a holistic view for network planning and operation. Number two is expand and modernize the existing network. And number three is operate intelligently using AI and ML. So these are three key points in breaking the energy curve. So sustained network evolution, so if you look at this 6 boxes with a circle in between, you can see that we have got network KPIs. So we want to sustain the KPIs with adoption of 5G, but we need to reduce the capex because we need to reduce the energy cost. And while we maintain the excellent user experience, where with more bands in the spectrum of 5G, we have got more data flowing through the pipes of 5G or through the networks all across the globe. And then we need to, the objective is to achieve the net zero, and we need to have circular economy where we can introduce recycling, for example, like hardware recycling or this sort of stuff. So for this, like, we need to have willingness to change, reduce power consumptions while we have satisfied customers. Now, traffic and energy patterns, like, so how the traffic profiling can help. So on the left-hand side, if you can see that like traffic segmentation, you can see that like, okay, that the red dots are the sites which bring 25% of the total data volume. So these are the sites which are contributing the highest in the data volume in terms of percentage. Then next comes the blue, which is 50%. Then next comes the green, which is 25%, which are low traffic sites. And then on these sites, we can do the traffic profiling in terms of user experience, and how we define the user experience from poor, fair, good, and great, which is like in terms of how many megabits, how many megabits per second they are able to achieve in the downlink and in the uplink. And then we do this traffic profiling on these sites versus we also see how much energy is being consumed by each site during the peak hours and during off-peak hours, and then how we can optimize these energy resources.
May I please request if you can wrap up?
Yep, sure. So I'll just go through a couple of more slides, and then traffic energy. So basically traffic volumes per site. So this entails we need to have a look at traffic volumes per site and user experience with the traffic type and proper dimensioning of the radios. And expand and modernize means that like we can have consolidation of the hardware where we can use multi-band radios and we can use more efficient ICs and amplifiers. And software, RAN software, in context of the software, we can have more efficient software where we can basically put cells to sleep during the off-peak hours. And then in terms of operations, we can have AI and ML based intelligent operations where basically we can employ data analytics, smart energy efficiencies to not only manage the active part of the RAN network, because RAN actually contributes to 75% of the energy costs in a mobile network operator. So we also need to manage the passive equipment, which includes the side equipment like battery banks, and solar panels, battery banks, and rectifiers, and those sort of things. So this is the last slide, and this is here where basically Ericsson proposes like we should have the predictive RAN energy optimization, which is the active part of the network, then predictive infrastructure energy optimization, the passive part of the network, and then these two both can have site energy profiling and power source optimization. And then we can also have like intelligent insights, assurance, self-healing, performance, and efficiency of the network through intelligent operations. So we had one use case actually, we had one scenario where basically a tier 1 Asian operator with 350 million subscribers gained a savings of 15 million US dollars and reduced 100 kilotons of CO2 emissions across the network per annum. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fawad Server, for such a comprehensive overview of 5G. Now, I would like to request our speaker, Mr. Abdurrahman Usmani. He's the Vice President at Jazz, for his overview. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Zainab. I'm Abdurrahman Usmani, currently looking after the Network and Technology Division of Jazz. One of the advantages or disadvantages of being at the last is that most of the things are already discussed. So I'll try to recluster or regroup the things to put a different perspective to the same facts. So I'll share the slide. Just give me a minute. As you may see here, 5G is not really a revolution. I would quickly go over these things. Previously, all the mobile generation were evolution of the previous generation with something to add over. 5G is more or less a revolution. A revolution, it is in a way that it introduced new verticals that should work with new business models. And this revolution itself has been evolving over time. The very initial use cases were extension of fixed wireless access or mobile broadband. MBB is enhanced mobile broadband, which basically gives faster internet speeds to the existing mobile internet. As our CEO says, speed enough is not enough. You can download a movie over 5G in 1 minute, but it will still take you 90 minutes to watch that movie. So just enhancing the speed of the internet might not have been the most successful proposition of 5G. That's where the 5G went into the other phase of its evolution, which is video and AR/VR. This is the area which is currently being developed. Many operators are trying to find use cases in this avenue, but they are still struggling. And ultimately, the third vertical is URLLC and massive machine type communication. We at Jazz believe that we are at least 3 to 5 years away from 5G launch, not because we can't do it technically. Jazz was the first one to launch the commercial demo of 5G NSA in 2020, in the beginning of 2020, and that was all done on the commercial network. Our core is 5G ready, our transport is 5G ready. We just need to we just need to acquire the spectrum and get the radios to launch 5G. Some of the people have spoken about fiber penetration. So for Jazz, in the last 25 years in the first 25 years of his history, we had only 500 sites which are connected to the fiber. In the last 1 year alone, we have added 2,000 more sites which are connected over the fiber. So from the technology point of view, from the infrastructure point of view, we are there. But instead of jumping into launching 5G and later realizing what to do with it, the best approach is to prepare well in advance and build use cases which will give a sustainable business model to this technology. I was with South Korea Telecom team some time back. They were the first one to launch 5G ever in the world. In the beginning, they saw huge uptake, natural pattern with the innovation. But over a period of 2 years, people started to realize there's nothing much for them to utilize over this network, and they were started to go back to 4G. And then they are seeing a decline in their ARPUs and also the customers on 5G. And now some of the speakers have already spoken about subsidies for the 5G networks as well. So in order to build that sustainable business case, the most important thing is to create an ecosystem. And Jazz has taken a leap in that step by creating the 5G Innovation Lab at NUST. Mr. Omar Malik also already mentioned it. The whole idea of this lab is to create locally relevant use cases which are monetizable and which could be used by the masses of the country. Most recently, Arcelic, which is the owner company of the Dowlands, has also created the R&D center at NUST, and we are already working on building IoT use cases with Dowlands in our NUST lab. We spoke about spectrums. I will skip this slide. I believe the initial launch will always be on the low band, which will ultimately go to mid band, and finally will go to high band. That's more of a technical discussion. So EMBB use cases that are being told right now is VR, AR, content, broadcast. Again, these are the things which are not mature yet, and I believe they will be mature in the coming years. They are not ready yet. Other use cases of URLLC is self-driving cars. I believe we need to put really good effort in building connected cars in Pakistan, building smart grids in Pakistan, building remote diagnostic infrastructure in Pakistan, developing infrastructure around sensor interaction. We need to build smart traffic solutions as well. So there's a lot of work to be done in that avenue before we can usually take elephant of that thing. Obviously, the last third vertical of 5G is MMTC, which is massive machine type communication, or which is called the massive IoT. We could build smart grids, micro grids, we could build smart cities, we could build smart transport, we could build lots of things, but they are not there yet. We don't have the smart cities, we don't have the smart home, we don't have any real use case where people would want to use 5G and will be willing to pay for it. And some of the people already spoke about it energy efficiency. That was the subject of this webinar. So on the gross basis, 5G consumes at least 2.5 times more energy than 4G. Although it gives almost 10 times more user capacity, so energy per bit is efficient, but unless we are able to build ecosystem which completely loads the network, the energy efficiency of 5G will be much lower than 4G. So taking out the time, I believe the regulatory regime is extremely important. Getting the spectrum which is cheaper is a very important. Denomination of spectrum in PKR is important, and also building the use cases which will be attracted to people who will be willing to pay for it is a key to building a sustainable business model which will benefit all the stakeholders. With that, I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdurrahman Usmani, for sharing the perspective of JAS. And with this, I would now request Dr. Abid Suleri for his concluding remarks. But before that, I'll request the panelists if they can share their feedback regarding the webinar on email, and also one-liner recommendation that they would like us to share with the Ministry of IT and Telecom. We'll appreciate it. So with this, I request Dr. Suleri for his concluding remarks. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Zainab. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the leadership and advice of Brigadier Yasin Saab in making today's webinar possible and successful. Of course, Brigadier Saab's contribution and role in understanding and improving telecommunication systems in Pakistan, those are praiseworthy, and thank you, Brigadier Saab. We pray for your sustained health and long life, and we pray to keep on guiding us. Of course, listening to all the industry leaders and of course Mr. Omar Malik Saab, it was just like receiving the pieces of jigsaw puzzles, and now it's up to the audience and the participants to reshape and realign those jigsaw puzzles to complete the picture, whether we are now 5G ready, how much time will it take, what are the pros and cons of it. But one thing is quite sure, that if one looks at the evolution and innovation in history of humanity, each and every problem, it comes with its own solutions. Now, by 2035, if one looks at the number of digital devices which would be interconnected, it would be 1 trillion devices. 1 trillion devices mean 100 devices per person who would be living on this planet. Now, providing energy to 1 trillion devices, even if they are running on a microchip, and of course, various distinguished speakers here, they gave us some glimpse of how that Internet of Technology things can work, starting from the use in agriculture, telling you about the humidity and this fertility and moisture level in the soil, to various other gadgets telling them when to fix them and when to repair them. So all of them, they would require energy. Now, there is an excellent piece of research that I would like to bring to the notice of the speakers. Now, I'm trying to go away from the written notes which were prepared for me, and telling you that so that not to repeat anything, but one of the important things that I want to highlight, and it is a recent paper produced by researchers from Georgia Tech Institute, Dr. Alan Age and others. Now they're talking of harvesting energy from 5G cells, and they are making use of a Rotman lens, of course, a technique from 1963, which were initially used to transmit energy. Now they want to use that technology to harvest energy. And they say that with the micro antennas, the size of a playing card or maybe less than it, which is printed on flexible substrate, they can actually capture electromagnetic waves emitted by 5G. And that sort of antenna can be placed with each and every connected device. Otherwise, the number of those batteries which would be required to keep 1 trillion devices energized, it would require 4 times more lithium than we are using today. So they say that with the help of this Rotman lens technique, working on millimeter bands, which are, as the speakers told, are not being used from 24 gigahertz to 100 gigahertz, they would be able to harvest energy, and the size, the maximum distance from which they can harvest that energy, the minimum distance is 100 meter, which is size of a 5G cell. So it would automatically become a self-energizing technique. So the use of 5G, although if it is energy intensive, with the help of new energy harvesting techniques and harvesting energy from the air, from electromagnetic waves, it would be able to reduce our carbon footprints. It would be able to reduce the energy required to keep all those machines and all those gadgets working. So of course, it is a reality. It is now getting unfolded. Yes, we know that due to this Huawei controversy, perhaps the journey to embarkment of 5G, it got slightly delayed, but then the technology is improving as well. I think he was mentioning about the use of clouds. Again, if one looks at use of cloud with the 5G and the type of mergers which are happening, whether it is the merger of Dish with Amazon Business Services, or the merger of Reliance Jio in India with their own cloud services. So that would again reduce the carbon footprint of 5G. It would reduce the cost of 5G due to the problems which Brigadier Saab mentioned, and which I think Khalisa mentioned in the beginning, and the letter that the telcos wrote yesterday about the network rollover in Pakistan, the problem that they are facing. And one of the demand which is made, and I'd like to endorse that demand, that telco services, those need to be considered as essential import. So under the notification of State Bank, 27 December, I think, if I remember correctly, 27 December 2022, the telco services, they are not considered as essential or priority services for import purposes. But we need to understand that the communication is one of the essential service of modern days era. So their import needs to be prioritized. One hopes the clouds of uncertainty from our political and from our economic landscape, they fade away, giving us opportunity to embark upon the clouds of the web clouds to actually be ready for 5G and fifth industrial revolution. And to me, the technological problems can only be solved through technological opportunities, and we need to get ready for technological opportunities. Thank you very much, all of you, from joining us from different parts of the world, Australia to America, for making us more knowledgeable on this aspect and making us more wiser on this aspect. I'll request Brigadier Saab for his last comment before we leave. Thank you.
Sir,
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saab. at the end, and it may not be the end, I hope, but I sincerely want to thank the worthy speakers for their time that they have taken. There is a great deal that we have learned today on 5G, particularly what the Ministry of IT and Telecom has been doing. In fact, most of us, including myself, we really did not know the hard work that they are putting in to put the country on road as far as telecommunication is concerned. What we will do, we will try and consolidate the recommendations that have come out from this webinar, and I suggest to them that they should also be shared with the speakers before we finalize them, and once they are finalized, we will try to send them to the relevant stakeholders, including Ministry of IT and Telecom. And once again, particularly speakers from America and from Australia, I sincerely want to thank you for your time and all the best, all our good wishes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our esteemed panelists. With this, we are ending the webinar, and the recording is available on the official social media pages of SDPI. We'll also be sharing the Zoom recording with all our panelists here. Thank you so much.